So today is actually the anniversary of the disappearance of 18-year-old Deirdre Jacob. And we're sort of going to talk about that, but we're going to delve deeper into where some of these missing women could be and the Garda's efforts to track down their remains and further their investigations. And obviously we're also going to talk about that very well-known suspect, the rapist, Larry Murphy, his possible involvement in some of these. And we're going to talk a bit of geography, David, etc. And we're going to talk about the landscape. So I suppose to start us off, Geraldine, can you remind us what happened 27 years ago and who Deirdre Jacob was?
Yeah. Deirdre was a young girl, as you say, 18 years of age. She lived in Newbridge. That particular day, she had gone to the bank to get a banker's draft, and then to the post office to post, obviously, the banker's draft. She had already spent a year at Strawberry Hill Training College in the UK, was very happy there. And this was to pay for her accommodation when she returned. So
she was getting herself organised to go back to college for the second year, and she'd been home for the summer with her parents.
That's right. Yep. And actually, Nicola, she was quite happy because she had a new boyfriend, and he was actually going to come and stay with her family and herself in Rosebery, which is just down the main street of Newbridge, and then you turn left.
Yeah.
And she had organised to get the house painted and a big scrub-a-dub-dub for his arrival. Yeah. So it was all exciting.
She was looking forward to her life going forward and really on the cusp of something, or of her future, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So she walks back towards her parents' home in Newbridge, and she gets as far as the front gate.
That's right. Front gate, because she was seen actually by a neighbour who was doing something on the roof or something, and he waved to her, and then suddenly she was gone.
And it's been described to me before that how bizarre it was, because she's there one minute and gone the next.
Exactly.
Nobody sees anything. It's like somebody just vanishes into thin air.
And the other thing, Nicola, it was around 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Broad daylight.
Yes, yeah. So this was, at a particular time when there was a number of women kind of going missing inexplicably. It's a period now referred to as the era of the vanishing triangle. And you yourself were involved in the making of an excellent documentary about it all called Six Silent Killings, which is still available on Sky. That came out about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So just give us a little picture about what was going on with these missing women and the years in question. When does Annie go missing?
Annie goes missing in March 1993.
Yeah.
Then we have Jojo.
Yeah.
We have...
So we're referring to Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dullard.
Yeah.
And then there was other women, for example, Fiona Pender.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Deirdre's disappearance was treated for a long time as a disappearance, as a missing person. I think probably her family and everybody around her realised very quickly
something was radically wrong.
There's no way she was going to go missing, or
because she was, as I said, she was really happy. So everything was going well in her life.
Exactly. She'd no reason to disappear.
No.
And obviously from a very stable home and background and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So the disappearances span between 93 to 98, but in 2000 they abruptly cease.
Correct.
But at that point, the Gardaí were so concerned there may be a serial killer in operation and that he may be targeting women and, abducting them and whatever, burying them, that they had actually set up a special unit called Operation Trace in order to see was there any connection between these cases. So that is going on in the background.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, it was inconclusive, and then Alan Bailey, who was one of the detectives involved, he then was put in charge to follow up, if you like.
Yeah.
And he was employed in that task for about 16 years.
Yes.
So,
So he was well acquainted
Yeah.
with the cases, and really, like, it's really difficult to disappear a human being. You know, it's not an easy task.
No.
And it's also a very rare crime when a woman is taken like that or murdered by a random stranger.
Mhm.
You know, it's probably what is women's greatest fear. They're walking down a dark street at
Yeah.
night, they hear footsteps, but it's a really random
yeah.
and rare crime.
Yeah, it is.
So in 2000, what happens, and how does that change the direction really of Operation Trace?
Well, in 2000, this woman who is referred to as the Carla woman, she was coming out of her workplace, going to her parked car, and she was set upon by Larry Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
And he took over Brad, tied her hands behind her back, put her into the well of the passenger seat, then drove to his own car, which was a little bit further away in the car park.
Right. Because somebody could have stumbled upon him.
Exactly. And then he bundled her into his car. Cleverly, he had brought the family car, which had the child seat in the back and all that kind of stuff. So for all intents and purposes, he seemed like he was beyond suspicion, if you like.
And that aspect becomes significant later on, in particularly in the case of Deirdre Jacob, because, and we'll talk about it maybe in depth a little bit further, but as he is apprehended, he alludes to the fact that, you know, maybe he puts the car seat in the back on purpose because women are more likely to approach him.
Yeah.
So he takes this woman, this businesswoman from Carlow, and he drives her towards Kilranelagh.
Kilranelagh, that's it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And but first of all, he stops at a park, which was known to him because he used to take his girlfriends there.
Right.
You know, as a young fellow.
Okay.
So he rapes her there. Then he brings her to the Kilranelagh site. And then he is putting her back into the car, putting a plastic shopping bag over her head. And by the luck of God, for the Carla woman, 2 hunters come down the hill. And he's obviously spooked. And as they're passing the car, they recognize him.
And they then find this woman
who
she takes an instant and she sort of starts to scramble away through the
barbed wire and stuff.
Can't see what she's doing, but she's terrified of everybody at this stage.
Of course she is. So they managed to calm her down, and then they brought her to the Garda station.
Yes, and they also know Larry Murphy and are able to identify him to the Gardaí at that stage. So the woman is brought in and, you know, ultimately gives her statement and is I'm sure brought to the sexual assault unit, etc. And the Gardaí arrive on Larry Murphy's door. Now, Larry Murphy is a family man.
That's right.
He's 2 kids. He's a carpenter, and he has gone home from this incident and basically gone to bed in his house.
He was actually a master carpenter because his specialty was doing spiral staircases.
Right.
But he also made children's toys out of wood and used to hand around his card to various shops and stuff like that. When the guards arrived, his excuse eventually was that he didn't know what happened. He just lost the plot, basically.
Yes, yeah. And he goes on trial?
He does. He goes on trial. He's arrested, obviously. He goes on trial, but he changes his plea to guilty. So effectively speaking, you know, the details that would have emerged, further details that would have emerged in a fully fledged trial, that detail is shut down. So he is, on the advice of the DPP, he's charged with with abduction, several counts of rape, and attempted murder. And so he is sentenced to 14 years. And he's jailed technically with whatever discounts and whatever, he is imprisoned until 2010.
Yes. And in that time period, since he's identified during this terrible attack, rape and attempted murder, of course, back to Operation Trace, who are investigating these missing women and what could possibly have happened to them, he all of a sudden becomes a really serious person of interest in those cases.
Yeah.
They begin to get to work to try and establish if there's any links between his whereabouts at the specific times these women went missing. And they also try a number of times, I think, to talk to him in prison, to ask him, has he anything to tell them that might be
useful? He refuses.
He refuses to talk. Now, there was a couple of threads that they did find that linked him. For example, that card you speak about, the master carpenter, was his card found in the grandmother's shop, Deirdre Jacobs' grandmother's shop.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's another possible exposure, if you like. When Deirdre went to the post office, there was CCTV footage. And when they upgraded her case to murder in 2018, there is an image of a guy in the background, and that was sent for analysis, if you like, for photo recognition and all that kind of stuff. But it was inconclusive.
Yeah.
And that's most likely one of the reasons why the DPP then recommended that no further charges should be made against him.
Okay.
Now, the one thing that's important is that we're now in 2025, so that's 7 years ago. Has that footage been sent out again? Because, the developments in technology is extraordinary. And I think the question has to be asked, and it's either yes or no.
For sure. Now, in the meantime, and before we bring David in, but just to say that at one point that while he was in prison, and Larry Murphy had few friends in prison, but one of them was his cousin, bizarrely, David Lawler, who was serving a sentence for the murder of Marilyn Rinn, another woman who was randomly targeted, raped and murdered as she came home from a Christmas party. He also was somewhat friendly with Frank McCann, who killed his wife and young child in a house fire in order to cover up other relationships he was having. So the three of them were friendly, and I know that certainly after it was released, the police asked either McCann or Lawler if they wanted to say anything. They had nothing to say either. But one particular night in prison, Murphy was full of prison hooch and got talking, and another prisoner alleged and certainly came forward and told the police that he had boasted about murdering Deirdre Jacob.
Right.
And he had told him a story that night, now full of hooch, that he had basically pulled in on the road. He had the child's seat in the back of the car, and he had overwhelmed her with one punch, dragged her into the car, and the story went on. Now, neither of those two individuals that were involved in that conversation were fully trustable because they are in prison for committing crimes. And obviously Larry Murphy is what he is. But again, there's kind of a couple of strands, isn't there? And there's a couple of hints that maybe. So moving onwards, you have been investigating this for a long time, and you are hooked up as such with David Kenny, who is a Frankfurt-based but now retired forensic scientist. And David, how did you get involved in sort of investigating Murphy's possible involvement or the landscape of around where he lived?
I think that the head scratching started after Larry Murphy's release, when, not surprisingly, your colleagues wrote extensively about the night of the abduction and the night of his only known crime. And the aspect of it that just kept bugging me was the fact that this person abducts somebody and brings them on a 15-kilometer journey to a place that he knows very well. And then on another journey, another 25 kilometers to a place he also knows very well. And that just happens to be barely 3 minutes drive from his own home. Now, a rational, criminal would seek to dispose of evidence. And I'm using the term evidence. I certainly don't want to be disrespectful to the victim. But you don't bring evidence to your back door. Logically, you would bring it as far away from your back door as is feasible. And I mulled over that for a long time, and so much so that I visited the place in question. And it was the first of many, many visits to that area. And the only scenario which would convince somebody who's looking at a long stretch behind bars to bring evidence to a place so near their home is one where the perpetrator is convinced they know a place where they can dispose of the evidence, and it's quick and safe and is known to them and presumably to no other. And, I'm a scientist, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a police officer, but apart from forensics, I'm also interested in geology, geography, geomorphology, archaeology, anything you can see or include on a map. And thanks to our friends in the Ordnance Survey, we have maps from 1870. We have 6-inch and 25-inch historical maps, and we've aerial photographs going back decades. So that was the beginning of a long search. And I've visited unmarked, disused mines, famine graveyards, quite a few abandoned buildings in the area in question. And the area in question is about 3 or 4 square kilometres in the shadow just west of Kideen Mountain. And it's uninhabited. It's quite densely forested. And it's used to some extent by the hunting community. So we visited that place on numerous occasions, and eventually I found a reference in 2017. I came across a document in the heritage section in UCD online, and it was handwritten by the local school teacher in 1938, I think it was. And he talks about a cave in that area. Now, back in the day, even something like Newgrange, which many people will be familiar with, that was called a cave, as was Doubt and Nout. We became a little bit more sophisticated later on, and we started labelling things a souterrain or a passage grave or whatever. And the same information can be found in a 1936 document, which is the proceedings of, I think it's the Royal Geographical Society. And thanks to the dog trainer, Paul Murphy in Carlow, we know from a still living elderly gentleman, who must be well into his 90s at this stage, he recalls seeing the blocked entrance to this cave when he was a boy. So we have living memory, and we've 2 historical documents pointing to a cave or an underground chamber. Now, it's important to remember that it's 1,600 meters approximately from the rescue location. So it's a walk or a very, very short drive. That in itself is interesting. Then just before COVID, my professor and my alma mater, John Casella, introduced me to North of Ireland man, Neil Powell, who trains dogs, and a bunch of us met down there. We had a geophysicist, we had 2 dog handlers, we had Ken Strange, and a retired FBI agent, Professor Casella, and myself, and my fellow traveller. And we explored the area, and the dog picked up on something near this stone circle, which fitted the description in the historical documents.
So this is a cadaver dog. So just
this is a cadaver dog.
For those people who don't know what cadaver dogs are, who are listening or watching this, a cadaver dog is an incredibly skilled animal, which is very expensive and put through very expensive training. And they're able to smell human remains. Now, somebody explained to me about these types of dogs they are. Would you believe Labradors can be trained to be cadavers? If anyone has a Labrador, they think it's not possible. But there are these dogs that have just so many sensories in their nasal passages that they have just this 40,000 times more smell system than we have. You can sometimes see these little dogs when they're pets and their nose is just jammed to the ground and they're just so excited by the smells. But they can smell human remains like from through walls, through the ground, and they can get a scent, and they will behave in a particular way when they do get that scent.
That's exactly right. Now, on the day in question, we were cursed by very high winds and heavy rain, and wind will dissipate the gas that the dog is picking up. And so the initial indication was weak but interesting. I think that was the words that Dr. Powell used. But he came back with 5 mile films sometime later, deploying the same dog in perfect conditions, and the dog clearly indicated strongly.
Yes.
And that's on video. In the meantime, Agent Strange had put me in touch with Paul Murphy in Carlow, who trains dogs. And Paul took a very direct approach. He took 3 of his own dogs there on separate occasions. Now, I didn't tell him where the other dogs had indicated, so we had to keep the experiment blind. And he briefed me on the results, and they turned out to be in the same place.
So and I think we have some pictures of this anyway, which we will use for the viewers of the podcast. But just explain what the area is like where they're picking up this scent.
The area is it's low quality farmland. It's used for forestry. It presumably would have been used for sheep. Like a lot of the landscape in Wicklow, it's kind of strewn with boulders. It certainly would not be a place where you'd bring your new John Deere and a plough. It wouldn't last very long. The townland in question would have been made up of small holdings back in the 50s. And if I'm not mistaken, the chap that did own the land back in the 50s emigrated to the States like so many others.
And just left it there.
The land was presumably sold to somebody else or to the current owner, whatever. But like many places in Ireland, it has some antiquities. It's an area of elevated ground. It doesn't feel like a mountain when you're standing on it. But if you turn the clock back 1,000 years, anything that wasn't elevated was probably knee-deep swamp.
Yeah.
So elevated ground was important. And it has a relatively large stone circle, which the folklore always referred to as Finn McCool's griddle stones, or just a stone circle. And it's not unusual to find these things in proximity to ring forts or maybe the odd Ogham stone. So it's quite rough terrain, but it's also quite isolated from the nearest occupied dwelling. If you're not used to the outdoors, you would regard it as a fairly lonely place. The possibility of travellers of any description being in there in the middle of the night is pretty remote. But continuing on the subject of dogs, like more recently, some chaps from with mountain rescue connections deployed 2 of their own dogs, again without being told in advance where the previous dogs had all indicated, and no prizes for guessing. They indicated in the same place or within a few paces thereof.
So you're talking how many different independent sort of dog reactions are we looking at?
We're talking about 7 different animals, if my counting is right.
Yeah.
With 1, 2, 3, with 4 different trainers.
Yeah.
Which is quite remarkable. I mean, 1 would be impressive enough and would arguably justify opening that thing again to see what they're responding to. But 7 is quite something.
Yes. So what we're saying is this place, this souterrain, is that what you're calling it?
Souterrain would be its correct term.
Okay. Yeah. Where is it located in relation to a road? Because we're unfortunately talking about well, not unfortunately, it's very fortunate that woman survived. You know, I'm sure she lives with the trauma of what happened to her that night. But nonetheless, her survival allows us a little window into what Larry Murphy was capable of doing and as you say, where he was comfortable of. So he's able to drive a car up near where this is. That woman has been already violated by him, but he's brought her there. We're talking about he's put a plastic bag over her head. He is convicted of attempted murder. So we can ascertain that this was the place where he was going to end that torture and he was going to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look from the scenario that we're able to, rely on, that he was going to bundle her back into the boot and go somewhere else. This was the moment that he was going to finish off what he had started doing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's able, David, to drive his car to a particular location, which is 1,600 meters, you say, from this?
Well, the rescue site is about 1,600 meters, but it is possible to drive within a couple of minutes walk of this place.
Yeah. And of course, isn't that important? Because when at one point the Gardaí had employed some geoscientists to try and locate areas around Blessington where they believed that perhaps, on his say-so this night on the hooch, that he had put her in a lake, he said, in Blessington. I remember they were mapping an area, but they always had to try and, put into the equation the weight of a dead body, which is incredibly difficult to transport by another human being. And they had to look at things, the hills, that they were going downhill rather than uphill, etc., etc. And that was just in the mapping. But in this geographic location, are you seeing that kind of, for example, had he completed what he set out to do that night, you believe it would have been possible for him to carry the remains of a woman to this area?
The distances in question between this stone circle, between the dog indication points and the nearest road accessible in an ordinary car, not a four-wheel drive thing, is quite manageable.
Right, okay.
Especially for a young, fit male who's looking at a long stretch behind bars. The motivation there will be not lacking.
Mm-hmm. So this is uncovered and you're working together, both of you, with the documentary series which resulted in the 6 silent killings. That was released about 2 years ago, and there was hopes that this would spur Gardaí forward to try and search these sites. Now, we hear of searches a lot of the time, and in recent times there's been quite a lot of activity around the investigation into the murder of Annie McCarrick and that of Jojo Dullard, and there have been extensive searches carried out, unfortunately yielding no results, but on lands and possibly without the cadaver, without what you have on this particular site, the cadaver, the 7 different dogs, recognising there are human remains there. So people would wonder, firstly, why has a search not occurred as of yet? But secondly, how big would that search have to be? What would have to be done? Is this something that is just so costly that we couldn't consider doing it?
Quite the opposite. And I would emphasise that the last thing I would like to see is a large-scale circus, which I know might sound disrespectful. I would not like to see a couple of dozen guards in there pulling the place apart. What we need is a small group of people that know what they're doing. You need a ground-penetrating radar operator. You need a dog and its handler. You need a couple of people that are capable of removing sod and removing earth. And the last thing we need is a JCB.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even use the word dig.
Yes.
We're looking, first of all, if there's bodies there, they were placed there by human hand, so they can be uncovered by human hand. And if it's a souterrain, it's a national monument. And if the description is accurate, a JCB will end up going through the roof.
Yes.
So it should be a specialised, low-key, small number of people, but specialised people. And the cost of that, bearing in mind that the guys that have helped me have offered their services for free, the cost relative to recent activities, it's pocket money prices.
Yeah. I mean, we actually have used one of those machineries ourselves previously on an investigation. So if a media company can afford to pay for it, believe me, the state can. Have you been to the area, Geraldine?
Yeah, I have.
And what is that? It's all very creepy. I should have done a creepy warning on this before. This whole idea of this sort of ancient burial site, and possibly, somewhere that Larry Murphy, who really has a reputation as such a bogeyman in this country, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
He was released and disappeared into Europe, essentially. The last known place he was living was in London, where he had managed to reestablish himself and conduct a new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He's able to live independently. He never needs to look back. He can always look forward. He's clearly got psychopathic tendencies and, is able to function in the world. But it's very hard for any of us to believe that he just one night did what he did with that Carla woman, had never done anything like it before and never did anything since. He is one of those individuals that has sort of served his time and slipped the net as such.
Correct.
So tell me about that place and what feeling did you get up there?
Isolated, obviously.
Mm.
I can imagine what it's like, because I went there during the daytime. I can imagine what it's like at night.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place you'd actually just arrive at.
Yeah.
So it's a place that you would purposefully go to.
Mm-hmm. And can you feel that this, is it a mound? Can you see it, like physically see it? Or are you standing on it without your knowledge?
Well, you might notice on the map that I sent you that it is, we call it a dome.
Yeah.
It's not a very steep hill,
no.
but it's high enough to ensure that ground would never flood. And that's why it was used by our ancestors way back.
Yeah.
So you don't really feel that you're on a hill.
No.
Yeah.
But you are. That's the best answer I can give you. But
and how would you access it if we're talking about needing ground penetrating? And obviously that is in case there is any remains there, which the dogs have 7 times told us there are.
Yeah.
So you don't want to dig into that to disturb anything or disturb any forensic evidence you could later gather. But how else would you access? How would a human being like, for example, Larry Murphy have had access to that?
There is a road, barely 5 minutes walk away. Now, it's not the kind of road you might like to drive down in your brand new car, but it is a drivable road.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who would frequent the hills at night, and there are a few for legitimate reasons, it wouldn't be particularly scary. I mean, everything is relative. If you're
used to it, yeah.
If you're a complete couch potato, then
you can forget it.
It's a terrible, scary thing. But if you're used to hunting or mountaineering or any of that sort of stuff, then it's pretty much a walk in the park.
So you're talking about the road, but I mean, how would you get into this underground cave? Is there, people visualize a cave having a
souterrain. Yeah, a souterrain was almost. There's about 1,000 of these things, perhaps a lot more, already known on the island of Ireland. So we're not talking about something that's particularly rare.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them were built in sometime between the Bronze Age and the Middle Ages, and they were probably used for storage for food through to the winter. Some people speculate that they were for hiding in, but I wouldn't hide in a hole that only has one entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were built by digging a trench, line the trench with 2 dry stone walls, just like you see in Connemara and many other places, and then you cover the roof in slabs, and you put back 6 or 8 inches or whatever of earth and let it grass over. So they're rarely very deep. They will descend, and you can see the plans and the maps of them online. There are experts on this particular subject in UCD. You don't have to go very far, but they will usually descend at a very gentle inclination, and they may have little antechambers off the passage. A lot of them will have a large chamber at the end, and so on. Some of them are very elaborate. A lot of them are quite simple. But the entrance, when it's uncovered, will be quite simple. It will usually be in a slight sloping area. maybe with an upright stone each side, and it won't look. It looked like a larger version of the light box over Newgrange.
Yeah.
And expect to crawl. They weren't built for 6 foot people. They're usually on average 4 feet.
Right.
4 feet high. So I'm emphasising the need to find the entrance and unblock it.
Yeah.
Don't knock a hole in it, because there's a perfectly good hole already there.
Mm-hmm. And it's your belief that this, if the funding is put into this search, that the first thing they need to do is find through that geo equipment the entrance, and then you're possibly looking at an entrance that doesn't need any equipment, that a human being could, once it's discovered, make their way into. It's there somewhere, basically.
Yeah, if the information we're given is correct, and we've no reason to think it's not, then the 90-year-old gentleman, hoping he's still alive, who saw this in his mid-teens, said the entrance is blocked up to keep livestock from getting stuck in it. That matches with what was written down in 1936 and 38. So what we will have there is we'll have many decades of grass and foliage and whatever falling on it. And underneath that, you'll see rocks simply put in the entrance. And again, it's important not to see this as exotic and speculative, because souterrains are common. And every year there's about a dozen new ones found, usually at the expense of some farmer's plough.
Yeah.
They turn up all the time because they were so common. And that's not speculative. That information, it's there, it's online, and I would encourage any non-believers in the Gardaí to, we've good universities, we've capable academics, go there, take an academic approach, and that's the way to do it.
And Geraldine, like Larry Murphy, we've spoken a little bit about his background. He was, he was a predator that was living as a family man. He was a master carpenter and continued that, and in a way that sort of got him back on his feet after his release, because he was working firstly in Barcelona, and he can pick up casual labour with that, etc. But he was also a hunter, and he did know his landscape.
Certainly did. And I think one of the points, 2 points really. First one is that if this site is to be investigated, the current landowner, who actually is his German family that own the estate, he has made it quite clear that it has to be done by the Gardaí, and that before anything is done, they have to go to the district court and get a search warrant.
Right.
So, because in other words, he wants everything above board and no evidence interfered with, etc. So that's clear. The Gardaí are well aware. Now, one of the only statements we've got, and I think you are the one who has it, David, is that they had surveyed the area in question. Is that right?
Yeah, it was an interesting response, because it came, I think, 2 or 3 years after. It was a response to something I had sent them 2 or 3 years previously, and it was essentially one sentence: that we have surveyed the area in question and the matter is now closed.
Yeah. So what does survey? I mean, if you want to be cynical,
I have no idea. I have no idea what that means. I mean, if they wanted to answer it honestly and fully, it would be: we found your souterrain and we found a dead pig. Please stop wasting our time.
Yeah. But also they would have had to get the search warrant, David, as well.
Well, I'm a civilian scientist, and all the guys that have helped with the dog handling and the geo-surveying and the other aspects of it, we are all civilians. We can make suggestions, we can think, we can forward our ideas, and we can offer assistance. We can't force anything. Simple as that. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, it has to be not carried out by, but supervised by
Gardaí,
the relevant authority.
For sure. And you're making a very logical, not even an argument. You're just making logical conclusions as to why this area should at least be searched and certainly surveyed properly. There is human remains there, according to these highly skilled cadaver dogs, 7 of them all independently discovering that. There is human remains there. Those remains, the dogs unfortunately can't talk and tell us they could be older or whatever, but they can definitely tell us there are human remains there. And cadaver dogs are being used more and more by the police in this country. The Garda Síochána have recognised, the usefulness of the cadaver dogs. We don't have our own. In actual fact, the Justice Minister, Jim O'Callaghan, was speaking recently about how the Garda Síochána were going to have to get their own cadaver dog because we're using the cadavers from the north. A recent trial of Richard Satchwell, who had murdered his wife Tina, heard how it was the cadaver dogs that discovered that she was buried under the staircase. And also cadavers have been out on other cases. So cadavers are not something that are used by, international or on the movies. Cadavers are part and parcel of modern policing. And these cadavers are telling us that there are human remains there.
I mean, just on a side note, or not a side note, I mean, the Gardaí did say something about having to bring a cadaver dog from the north. I mean, that's fundamentally untrue because Paul Murphy has assisted Gardaí and Civil Defence and many others. And I mean, he's 10, 15 minutes drive away from this location. Yeah. And he did also feature briefly on, I think, Prime Time, maybe 2 weeks ago. So the resource is there. It's not a case of we don't have the resource. It's why isn't it being used more? And I can't answer that.
So both of you, your appeal today really is, and I'm sure you get fed up because it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall, but you're making you have done a very logical investigation. I think anybody listening or watching this can totally understand how you have put together the pieces of this jigsaw to create a picture. And you're making an appeal for the Gardaí to step up now and to examine that area.
Absolutely, Nicola. As David has said, they're aware of this particular site since 2012, is it, David? 2012?
Well, the first time I informed Gardaí about the souterrain was in 2017, but there were no canine data to back that up. So it would have been short, I think, to 2021, shortly before COVID. When the first Dr. Powell's dog indicated, and we sent the Gardaí a letter offering our services. All they have to do is get us a green light. Now, duty bound as I am, every time additional dogs have indicated, I've updated the documents with dogs' names, dates and times, and I've updated the Gardaí accordingly. So they have been, whether they like it or not, they have been kept fully
briefed.
The picture. And we have an obligation to do that irrespective of the response.
And knowing the Gardaí, as I do over many years, it's a lumbering, large civil service in many ways.
Correct.
What you are dealing with from an investigative point of view is what? Is there an open investigation into Larry Murphy? He remains a person of interest in a number of different murder investigations, which are located in a number of different areas. You have that overarching serious crime review team who are helping review some of these cases. And then you have presumably the Garda Technical Bureau. So you have an awful lot of different sort of departments and places. Where to target at this point is presumably to try and get the attention, I would imagine, of the Minister of Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, who has been very proactive since he's been in that role, and is good actually at...
He has actually shown an interest. Absolutely. He has.
So that's good news.
That's encouraging.
Absolutely.
But I think he also, like everyone else, is... and I know that your reports and whatever else, David, went to Drew Harris, the commissioner. You never get a reply. So basically, it's up to Drew Harris to instruct a team to go and search the area. I mean, the longer this goes on, it's a waste of time. It's either relevant or it's not.
Exactly.
And we can all move on.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things in relation to Larry Murphy is when they upgraded Deirdre Jacobs' case in 2018, the Gardaí had requested assistance from the Met Police in London, and they managed to track him down, etc. And they did visit him, and I think he was taken by surprise. And what he said was that they were to come back the following day. Now, in the interim, they were actually searching Kilranella at the time. And when they came back the next morning, he said, which is an interesting statement, you didn't find a body. And so now you can F off.
Right.
And he walked away. So why would he say you didn't find a body? Hello?
So many questions with Murphy and his behaviour and his reactions to things. And he has been far from helpful and never will be.
No.
So it's not a case of sitting back and waiting for him to have a moment, a road to Damascus moment, that he may come forward and give information. He may have had nothing to do with any of these cases. But again, as you say, there is something here and it makes perfect sense to go examine it and rule it in or rule it out.
Yep.
And
we can move on.
And move on. And the brilliant minds of both of you could be placed elsewhere, because it seems like you've been left hanging there for a long time. But look, for such an interesting, fascinating story, and thank you both for coming on the podcast. And as we said at the beginning of this is tragically the anniversary of Deirdre Jacobs' disappearance 27 years ago outside her home in Newbridge. And I'm sure not a day has gone by that her parents and loved ones haven't been absolutely tortured by what happened to her.
And especially also her sister. Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Geraldine Nyland and David Kenny, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nicola.
Pleasure.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.